Hi, I'm Mr. Pink, otherwise known as Modern Synthesis, and I'm here today with my hobby buddy Hydra,
Hello.
and we're going to discuss a very important issue in the hobby. Is 3D printing the hobby messiah that we've been waiting for? So this is going to be another Deepthought video, but it's going to be a little different from the kind of Deepthought videos that I've done in the past. As you can see, Hydra's here to have kind of like a tete-a-tete conversation about 3D sculpting, 3D printing. It's a lot longer than the standard Deepthought video, but hopefully you enjoy it. Hydra, thanks for joining me on this one to have this
Thank
chat.
you. Thanks for the
And this
invitation.
of course, and this grew out of a kind of a impromptu chat that you and I were having, just kind of sending messages back and forth. And the stuff that we touched on in that, I found it so interesting that I thought it might be interesting to have like a greater conversation about.
Please, whoever is listening, whoever is watching, please take a second to think about what is the one thing you crave in the hobby the most. For example, is it game time? Is it painting stuff? What is it that you really crave, that you really want? What would be your answer?
For me,
Yeah.
I want converted miniatures. Like I want the time to sit around and convert miniatures, and I want like the supply of miniatures to keep converting into different things. And what about you? What's your number one thing? If you could pick one thing that you want.
I would have said the same thing a good while ago, but as I have been observing myself and my behavior recently in my miniature hobby life, I've come to the understanding that the social interaction with other people is my prime motivation for any hobby project. So if I have 3 different hobby projects on the line and I'm unsure which I'm most motivated to do, it will always be the one that is the most promising of the next social interaction. For example, I have like a conversion project that I've been working on for, I look at you, Dim Karen, for 2 years.
The original creature conference, the thing that launched the whole creature conference.
Yeah, exactly. So I have this one, and it was highly motivating for me because we were talking about us doing that thing. But as you guys have started to do other things, it became apparent that not the conversion itself, but our interaction was most important to me. So I pushed that aside and started to work on other things. Then I started to work on things for competitions on Instagram, because there I was sharing pictures and I got into contact with other people, and talking about the projects I was working on was the thing that was important to me. I got a visitor this weekend who played with me a game I have never tried before, and I did not have miniatures for that. So I stayed up until 3 this morning, no, the 3 on Saturday morning, to finish painting the miniatures for that game. And I have spent 1.5 weeks in advance to finish those miniatures for this specific game.
Yeah.
Because it was the next social interaction I was having.
Yeah.
And that pushed all the other things aside. So for me, the most thing that I crave is to get in contact with other people about and talk and play with them and talk with them about the hobby.
Okay, but tying it back to our point about 3D printing, what would you expect if we were to ask like the average hobbyist if they could have like one thing? What was the one thing they want most in this hobby? What do you expect they would say?
I would say cool miniatures.
Yeah, like it's a miniature hobby, right? It's tabletop wargaming. We all got into it because probably we didn't all get into it because we're like, yeah, I want to push these guys around a table. We probably got into it because we saw a cool miniature and we're like, that is a damn cool miniature. What is this all about? And that pulls you into the hobby. So yeah, as you said, the average hobbyist likely wants unlimited miniatures. And what would be one source for getting unlimited miniatures?
Well, you just said unlimited miniatures. I said cool miniatures.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's 2 different things, I would say, because cool miniatures is not necessarily unlimited miniatures. When I think about when I started the hobby, the thing I craved more was, for example, we played together in 2nd edition, and my friend it was his birthday, and he got a Space Marine with a jump pack. And we played a game, and this Space Marine with jump pack kick ass. And I was so excited about this thing. So I saved up all my money and I don't know, went to my parents and asked for some help there and mowed the lawn. And then I went to Games Workshop and bought me one metal Space Marine with jump pack.
Yeah.
That thing was the coolest thing in the world to me. But there was one miniature. So that was, that was the most important thing for me.
The cool miniature.
Yeah, one miniature. And I was happy
Yeah,
for weeks.
And one of the first things that I ever did in the hobby was like I saw a Screamer Killer in somebody's case, and I was like, "That's a damn cool miniature." And then I went to Games Workshop, and I bought some cool miniatures. I didn't know what the hell. I didn't have a codex yet. This was in second edition, but I got a
Who
Hive
needed a
Tyrant.
codex? You had to decide you either buy miniatures or you buy the codex.
So I got the Hive Tyrant, and then I got some termagants or something like that. And I think I borrowed a codex from someone, but it was the cool miniatures that got me started. And the guys in Games Workshop were like, "Yeah, when you're starting painting, you should probably paint the termagants before you paint the Hive Tyrant, so you can practice." And I'm like, "Screw that, man! I'm painting the coolest miniature. I'm painting the Hive Tyrant."
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, so definitely it's the case that a lot of people in this hobby are motivated by cool miniatures. That's what pulls them into it. But
yeah.
Then it comes to the rub. Like you said, you had to mow the lawn to get the money to buy that jump pack Space Marine. And I had to get my mom to buy me a Hive Tyrant and some termagants because I didn't have the money when I was a kid. And that's kind of like, there's the rub that when you're in this hobby and you're really into these cool miniatures, the thing that keeps you from buying up all kinds of cool miniatures is the price. That in our conversation before, you mentioned how with their games, Games Workshop creates a demand for miniatures, for cool miniatures. And the thing that keeps us from buying them all is the price. That it's too expensive.
Exactly.
We have to budget our money. We only get certain ones. Yeah. Do you want to say more about that, or?
Yeah, it's all about marketing strategies, and we can talk about marketing strategies for ages. And you either pick I would say the moral side,
Yeah.
and say,
morality. Are you looking for morality?
Yeah,
Side of morality.
That's one side you can pick and say, I have a miniature, and to produce this miniature, to pay for everyone involved in the process, and for everyone involved in the packaging design. And there's so many factors that go into the production of one single model. Especially if you do it to a certain standard or degree, like having artworks and rules for it and all the things that go into a miniature, and you factor all that in, and then you think about how often you will sell this thing. Then you have like a fixed number, a fixed price per miniature, and then you go and add like an average profit to that.
Yep.
Then, for fuck's sake, a single plastic model shouldn't cost 30 euros. I cannot see that the production of one single plastic framed model would cost that much. Not when other companies do it for, like you get big frame and you have like 40 miniatures for 30 euros.
Yes.
They look differently. And they maybe the ones who created those did, I don't want to say we're not that talented, but had different design aspects in their mind. Like when you look at Perry miniatures, those are some damn fine miniatures, but they are completely different from GW's because they have a different goal they want to reach. They want to be historically correct. And GW wants to have like an atmospheric,
heroic proportions, stuff like that.
Exactly.
But it comes down to like go ahead.
Yeah, but when you factor all that in, then I was shocked at the prices, honestly. It's been a while since I bought like Games Workshop figures for a while. Now I was talking about the game I played today and yesterday, which all got me hooked up with undead miniatures. And GW has some really nice undead miniatures for sure. But when I looked up, I was in the store and had the box of 20 skeletons in my hand, where I thought this would be enough for like 2 war bands. And I looked at the price and I didn't buy it. Although I'm absolutely hooked by this game and I absolutely crave those models, I did put the box back because I
Yeah.
said I'm not going to spend that much money on 20 skeletons.
And it, like, when you're describing it that way, that's someone like Perry Miniatures or a different company, like there's Victoria Miniatures, that kind of stuff. They can produce more models for a cheaper price. It makes me think of the whole like Mac PC debate, that no matter what
Mhm.
you say about Macs versus PCs, this, that, the other thing, design, who cares? You're buying a computer. And the reason you're paying more for a Mac is branding. And the reason you're
Yeah,
paying more for a Games Workshop miniature is branding. That
exactly.
they're leaders in the field. They've got the most people bought into their IP, bought into their games, and they charge what the market will. They charge what the market will bear. And because there's so many of us that have gotten so used to this, and they've been doing the frog boiling in water, stepping up the prices every
Yeah,
year,
yeah,
we tell
yeah,
ourselves that. And then also, we've all been getting older. Like, we start into this as teenagers or kids or whatever, and as we get older, we have more disposable income around like our life responsibilities, so we can start to justify more and more. We see this. I think about this with the toys. Like, you can see a bit up there. I got some toys displayed, and if I zoomed out on Hydra's video, you could see a lot of toys displayed in his background. And I just can't help thinking about how we all started as kids, getting our parents to buy these things for us, and then like you got some nice displays over there, some other Masters stuff. As we've aged, we've gotten more disposable income to spend on toys than what we
yeah.
had as kids. And that's when you get like the HasLabs like Kickstarters, where it's like, you can buy Unicron, you can buy Jabba's sail barge, like, because we know you bastards are adults now, and you've got hundreds of dollars to spend on plastic to put on shelves. I got a Rocinante up there, cost me a couple $100. Yeah, it's something where they will charge what the market will bear. And as we've gotten
Yeah,
older and as we've gotten greater disposable incomes, we can bear more.
yeah.
So they keep
But
upping
it
the
is
prices.
but it is so inconsistent. That's what I think what kind of bothers me. When you look
Mhm.
at GW single models on a frame in a blister pack, you have certain models that cost, at least that I saw, were 13 euros. And then the
Mhm.
same package, the same frame, the same thing that cost 30 euros, like more, like almost triple the price.
How do you mean? You
And
mean
that's,
like a character model or something?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't see the justification for that other than the opposite of what I said before. If you think about pricing a model, you can either go and say we have this fixed costs and we put up like a little on top for us to be profitable, or you have the fixed price, then you put the thing on top to be profitable, and then you raise the bar as high as you dare for the people to buy that.
Hmm.
And then you end
And
up with and then you end up with a single model costing 30 euros.
and I think that that's very much what Games Workshop is doing. That I think that's very much what any company would try to do, to raise that bar
Of course.
as high
Yeah.
as they can dare, like, and still to make their profits.
Well,
Um,
I don't want to bash GW completely on that. Whoever
no.
wants to play Legion or any other Star Wars miniature game like X-Wing, where you pay for such a freaking small X-Wing, like 25, 30 euros, that's ridiculous as well. Because they are, it's a single model. Yes, it's pre-painted. It's not very well pre-painted, whatever, but it is high. It's a single model for 30 euros.
So okay, so we have this issue where we have these miniature companies who are bending us over the barrel because they know we love their miniatures and that we think they're cool, and our driving impulse in this hobby is to get cool miniatures. They're like, ha ha ha, here's some cool miniatures. Give me all your money. What's going to save us from that, Hydra?
You can either start learning to sculpt yourself.
Which you and I would advocate.
Yeah.
Although, wait, no.
No, we
That,
always
like,
advocate that if
hardcore people like Kajan, who wants to make everything himself completely from scratch. That's one level. I don't have the patience to make everything from scratch completely. Like, I will take like existing models and I will like convert them to make them more like the kind of thing that I'm looking for, but I'm not going to make them completely from scratch.
and as we said in previous videos, uh, if there is a bit like a hand or a face or something, use the bit and not try to. Well, you can try to sculpt it if it rocks your boat, but it's not.
Yeah.
You know, yeah,
It's going to be a lot of time. It's going to be a lot of frustration. And there are a lot of faces and a lot of hands out there. That's a good, there you go. We weren't meaning to do a hobby tip in this, but there's your hobby tip for this conversation. If you can buy a face, if you can buy a hand, buy a face, buy a hand. It's going to save you in time and frustration. Definitely.
yeah. The internet is large and wide, and you have to look out for hands. For example, like I found a kit, costs 18 euro, and has 10 open hands in there. If it would just be for the open hands, like left and right hands, I would buy that kit. Because when you think about time, sculpting things, and just clipping off a hand and gluing it to the hobby project you're just working on, that's unbeatable. But
Yep.
18 euros, well, there are not just 10 hands in there, there's a shitload of other bits as well.
Become attached to cool models.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, that's, as we are focusing on converting stuff, that would be our prime target to look for resources where we can get cool bits from.
Yeah, like at the beginning of the also just converting in general, at the beginning of this chat, you talked about Dim Karen, like the Dimacron project that we started with Creature Conference, where for that situation we wanted to torture you, so we sent you an actual Forge World Dim Karen Dimacron model so that you could fix it, so that you could improve it, show people how it could be done better. But so many people, the Dimacron is a model that apparently has really good rules. People don't bother buying it from Forge World. They go out and they convert it. They make it from a Tyrannifex. They make it from like something else. So there's Karen. She still exists. She's gonna be finished one of these days. Yeah, just to say that another option for getting what you need in terms of models, but saving money, is to convert things, to not buy the Forge World model, but to get something that could serve as a Forge World model. Thrifty Squirrel does this famously, where Thrifty Squirrel will take like 15 different Tyranid plastic kits and make a bunch of like hair duels, all kinds of stuff out of them. Yeah, so definitely being thrifty about your models, either reusing stuff you have, converting stuff you have, seeking third-party models is one way to save yourself from price creep. But the focus of this conversation, what's the newest thing that's come onto the scene to save people from model price creep?
Is 3D printing. Yay! And as you said, I think 3D printing has developed incredibly quick. From the filament printer that were kind of cool, but okay-ish. You know, they were just good enough to print, well, for my taste, for my standard.
Yeah.
Filament printers are just good enough to, you know, print some role modeling terrain stuff, which you just, you know, print, spray paint, place on the table, play your role-playing game in there, and then discard them.
Yeah.
Because you always see the lines there. So the filament printer is not usable for our hobby because you have all those lines.
I would say you can do terrain with it. Like people do, like if you're doing large enough terrain and you're just moving models around it, I wouldn't agree with the like you got to throw it out. I have some barricades that were printed on a filament they're from Dark Fantastic Mills, I think. You can use them, and like you can sand them down.
As I said, for my standard, that so, you know, I want to have smooth surfaces and not see lines on them. I think there's sci-fi terrain where you can use that. I've seen solar panels that were printed where the line pattern actually added to the model.
Mm-hmm.
But if you think about, you know, adding if you want to print a wooden barrel, and you have like the barrel is standing upright, and you have those layers go this direction, this just looks shit.
Well, like our buddy Spencer, who you know, Loading Dock Miniatures, he's really like killed it on using a filament printer to good use, because he has such a background in miniatures, and like I think he has some background in like CAD design, where he will take like that wooden barrel, Whereas like they supply to you like supported like this, so the lines are going like this or whatever, or the lines are going like this. He'll take it, he'll reorient it, and he'll
Shifted.
print like
Yeah.
part of it and hide the lines. And like you can
Yeah.
find ways around it with those printers, but it is something where that particular kind of printer has challenges, and you got to work around them. Like you gotta if you worry about that kind of stuff, you gotta work. But it is the case that that can produce terrain pretty quickly, cheaply.
Quickly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then also there's resin printers, right? Like the
Yes.
which are much higher detail, and like the stepping is
Yeah.
not nearly as
Yeah.
pronounced, so they can do much better.
And
So
and the printing, well, when you think about printers, I would say the quality of a print, like if you see the layers and how much detail you can get onto a printed model, that is one aspect of 3D printing. And I think that 3D printing has come up to the point where it kind of replaces actually natural sculpting, because there are printers that are, I think, they have 8K resolution.
Mhm.
They print so thin lines that they are so smooth that you cannot see the lines with your naked eye anymore. And companies use that technology to sculpt a 3D model on the computer, print it out, and use the print as the master model for the further process. Okay. So 3D printing has come to a standard, or to a quality standard, that you have like a resolution of 8K, whatever that means, but you have such a clear print, or the lines are so thin in which the printer works that you cannot see them with a naked eye. So companies use that technology to print their master models, which they take to further on cast them. For example, I think Atelier is doing that. And the beauty of that is that you don't have to have like a massive studio to do that. It can be just one dude sitting there sculpting stuff with a good printer, and then doing silicone molds with them and casting them in resin, and then there you go, a tiny
as
furniture.
as Hive Delta does, like that's
Yeah,
his production model, that he's sculpting stuff on his own, he's printing it, and then he's casting it with silicone molds, and then he's selling that. Also,
yeah,
there's been evidence that people have found that Games Workshop does this, that
yeah,
a lot of the models that we see, well, I don't know about a lot, but at least some of the models that we see painted in like the previews for miniatures in codexes, stuff like that, that's a 3D print of the initial model before they've made the actual plastic ones. And they just get someone to paint that up, because people have seen like a little bit of stepping. I can't remember. I think it was some Eldar model where someone detected some stepping in a painted model, or maybe it was like a Space Marine. I don't know. Yeah, to point to the fact that they're doing exactly what you say, that the quality is so high that they can print a model and use that as just a display piece, that it's going to pass. So there you go, Simon. You found it. Like, what is the Messiah that's going to save us from having to pay exorbitant Games Workshop prices? Surely it's resin printing, right?
of course, yes. We're all gonna get shitloads of miniatures. We will drown in miniatures because there are so many.
Yeah, it's so cheap. Might as well be free. Once you buy that printer, you buy the resin, figure out how to set up your plates, get all your hydro, figure out a fume hood to make sure it's not poisoning your family, stick it out in a room of your house where no one goes. Free miniatures. Great. Well, there are certainly costs involved. And when you and I were talking about this, you mentioned this for yourself, and it's something that I agree with, that 3D printing in some cases takes a bit of precision, that you need to know like how to set stuff up and measure stuff. You and I are not precise people. People are like, how much green stuff do you use? I'm like, I don't know, some. They're like how, like what weight? I'm like, well, I don't know. I just take it off until I need more, and then I take some more. So yeah, we are not precise people, but 3D printing does require a bit of precision to like get it all right.
Yeah.
But conceivably, once you've got that precision figured out, you can just, print forever and have unlimited free models. Have we achieved it? Is it unlimited free models? Surely there's no downsides to this.
I think going back to what we crave, and if unlimited models is the thing we crave, would that satisfy you? Would you be happy then?
Well, I said unlimited models. You said awesome. You said cool models, funky models. That's what motivates us. That was something that I started getting into when we were talking about this. I think that feeling that you can have any model you want when you want it from a 3D printer.
Yep.
that is like a big boon, but it's kind of like a scale. Like you've got quantity and you've got quality. I wonder sometimes if people who are doing a lot of 3D printing, they're so excited about the quantity that they can do,
Yeah.
that they can go
Yep.
on the internet and find an STL for anything and print
Yep.
it off at home, that they start to accept lower quality because they
Yeah.
can get that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, my partner in crime, no, my regular,
Your partner in crime.
my regular gaming partner has bought a 3D printer in last month or 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm going to set myself a limit of buying 1 bottle of resin a month and use that up. And when I'm done with that, I won't print anymore because I am afraid that I will drown the miniatures.
Yeah, I think you described it as a swamp of miniatures. You're just drowning in a swamp of miniatures.
And like last month, I'm not telling a secret here. I think he bought 3 bottles because it was, I want to do this and now I want to do that. I'm guilty of that as well. He said, well, I always wanted to play War Master. Like I have the old rule book, and he always loved the game when he was younger. I said, well, okay, War Master, whatever. As I said, my priority is the social interaction, and if my gaming partner says I want to play War Master, then I will say, well, okay, can I live with that to play with them? He set me up with 1,000 skeletons, zombies.
1,000 points or 1,000?
No, that's 1,000 models. 1,000 6mm high skeletons, zombies, ghouls, bats, wolves. That's an undead army. Yeah. I now have like a box full of undead. Like it's an undead army. But it's scary because I open the box and look at them, and then I shut the box again and say, I'm not going to paint that. That's nuts. It's unlimited miniatures. That what made me happy. I got 1,000 sitting there staring at me and saying, paint us, paint us.
So I guess that's something that I was wondering about as well. With the ability to print miniatures, if I had a printer myself, I think I could see myself getting caught up in the ability to print. Like the question of whether I could print something, whether I could make myself a miniature, and I wouldn't stop to ask if I should make myself a miniature. Yeah, I can print this, I can print that, I can print the other thing. But at the end of the day, it's the swamp of miniatures. Like I've already got a pile of shame hanging out in those boxes over there. Like it's just an unlimited pile of shame that's just going to keep building and building and building until like I paint them or I have something to do with them. I think that can probably be intoxicating, where you have this device that can just, as you said, fulfill the desire for miniatures that we all have without having an obvious cost outlay. Like sure, you buy like bottles of resin, but then you do whatever you want with them. Like you print this one, you print that one, you print the other one. And it probably seems a lot cheaper than having to actually buy them from Games Workshop.
And now we have to factor in another aspect into this equation, and that's the quality of the design quality. And I see 3D printing as a two-bladed sword there. On the one side, we have with 3D printing and the way a model is produced, we have a great liberation and a great democratic movement there. You are not necessarily dependent on big companies to produce something that you want. If you want, you can, use your tablet or your PC and start, learning how to, for very little money, how to 3D sculpt your stuff on your PC. And I think that's way more forgiving than sculpting it by hand, because you can always go back. And if you have sculpted something on a PC, you can print it as often as you want. You don't have to make like a master. You don't have to get silicone mold. You don't have to get resin. You don't, you just put it on the plate and print it 15 times and then you're good. For example, you make up your own Space Marine chapter. Sorry, I'm sticking with Space Marines, but I think that's an easy thing, So you design your own chapter symbol, and then you go print your own chapter symbols for your Space Marines. This is something you can do, and you don't have to hope that the big company that's producing Space Marines is producing something that you like. So it's kind of handed back to you what you want to do. But the other side is that since everyone can do that, before, the quality of miniatures on the market was very high because you had to have a high degree of quality, because otherwise you could not compete with the others. So the most beautiful miniatures would stay on the market and everything else would be washed out. Otherwise, or if they are comparably cheaper, they would stay in the market and kind of fill a niche there. But now you don't have this quality check by the market anymore, because everyone can do it. And now you have all the STLs in the world, but the quality of those vary so massively that you sometimes think, what is that? Like, what's
Yeah.
that weird piece of what?
Bringing it back to Tyranids, because you and I met through Tyranids and we're Tyranid lovers. I think you can see this, like a microcosm of this, within the specific 3D printable models that are available for Tyranids. Back in the day when we were doing Tyranids, do you remember, was it Cromlech that did those like weird kind of xenomorph? No, it was a different company.
They were called Cryomech.
Some people asked which came first, Tyranids or this other miniature company. They had like weird snake kind of aliens, and they had like bone sword looking things as well. But people would buy those because they were cheap, and they would use them as Tyranids because they're like, well, this is cheaper than Games Workshop. I mean, this stands in. Like, I can get a cheap thing that looks kind of like a Tyranid. And I feel like that's what's happening now. Both like people who are sculpting and trying to sell their own design and people who are printing, that they look at a Games Workshop like a Hive Tyrant and they're like, well, yeah, but that costs like $70, $80, whatever. Whereas I can go get this thing over here from, I'll mention Puppets War, because they're doing, I think, a Kickstarter or something where they're doing a bunch of like Tyranid-ish miniatures. And this is something that like I noticed because there's someone in the community who has the Kickstarter and has a printer and has been printing them and using them as stand-ins for Tyranids. It's kind of like if you took a picture of the thing way on the table and you saw it, it has like all the pointy parts in the right places that you're like, oh, that's a Tyranid. But then when you get up and you look at it, like you said, it doesn't pass the quality test. That the details kind of like bleed into one another, and it looks kind of like melted wax with like this there, and there's no definition between like the different parts.
Melted wax is a good comparison.
Yeah, it honestly feels like, you know, the old, I don't know if you watch Pokemon, but like, which Pokemon is it? Is it blah, blah, blah? And they would show like silhouette of a Pokemon. You had to guess the Pokemon. I feel like Puppets War takes the silhouette of a Tyranid and just like fills in some junk, some like random gobbledygook. And you see the silhouette and you're like, oh, it's a Tyranid. And then like it reveals the thing behind the black silhouette and you're like, oh, what? That's not what I was expecting at all. And it feels like, yeah, the quality filter, that people are so excited to be able to print Tyranids on their own and not have to pay Games Workshop prices for them, that they let their demand for quality kind of take a back seat to the accessibility. And like you said, that it is democratizing the creation of miniatures. That I did a previous Deepthought video about 3D printing, and it was about the Parasitomortrex and how Games Workshop put out a picture of that, and someone on the internet sculpted it before Games Workshop even released it and had the STL up on the internet. And it wasn't amazing, but there was a bit of like kind of like hobby socialism in there, freeing the means of production so that anyone can access this. And that was, I said in that video, but this was cool for people in Australia because Games Workshop didn't release the Parasitomortrex in Australia for maybe 1 or 2 months after the rest of the world got it, because, you know, shipping delays and whatnot. So that's cool, but they tried pretty hard to get that close.
The question I want to heretically ask here is, I just reacted like, what, they did not release it for 2 months there, and I was surprised by that.
It might have been 1 month. Don't quote me on but it was 1 or 2 months.
Who cares? The reaction, if it would have been 1 week later, would have been the same. They would feel like being left behind, while the rest of the world has it and we don't, even if it's 2 days. Who cares? The question that I want to ask is, why are you shocked by that? I just asked that myself.
By which part?
So because we are so programmed to cheer for the new and shiny that we're not even thinking about it anymore. That's something that's part of the brainwash, that we're constantly assaulted by new releases, like this is new and this is new and this is new and this is new and this is new, that you barely can pause and think about, should I be excited about this, or just should I say, okay, interesting, and I worry about something else? Because as long as you're hyped for the next thing to happen, you keep spending money on those things without even asking if you want them. That's where I would say that's where every company wants the consumer to be. They don't want us to think about if we actually need this. They want us to buy it and afterwards maybe think about if we need it, or best case, put it aside and buy the next thing. Be happy with that and then buy the next thing.
I think you've hit on something interesting there, because we've been programmed into this mode of like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? By Games Workshop. And as you've commented before, that they're doing this new thing where like certain things they release and then they take them away, and people are now even more worried. They're like, I gotta buy this because it might not be there tomorrow. And
now what they did is, with a drastic price increase, they're doing that even more. Like, the fear of missing out is increased by that, because Games Workshop did not ever lower the price on a model. I don't think so. They ever reduced the price on anything.
I think you're right.
They repacked maybe things, and then because there was more in a box, they were price per model were cheaper, but they never said, oh, we have a box that costs, I don't know, 25 euros, and because we're so generous, it's now 20 euros. Repacking them, and that was kind of a price decrease they sometimes did, but it always went up. So that what they're doing now is they, for example, with Warhammer Underworlds, I got a set of undead miniatures, as I am right now all into undead miniatures. They were 20 euros back then. And now the same box from the Underworlds costs around 30 euros. So that's 10 euros more than they used to be like 5 years ago. That's a pretty drastic price increase. That's one thing. So if I'm now standing in front of those boxes, I have to ask myself two things. One, will I be maybe wanting that box in the future? Maybe I could use that at some point, because I maybe would be interested in undead in 2 years, and then I want this box, and then I cannot buy it anymore. So the fear of missing out. And the second thing they factor in is the price will always go up. So when you stand in front of a box, you have to buy it now, because it will never be as cheap as it is right now. In addition to being constantly assaulted by new releases, you're like, oh, I don't need to think about if I want this or not, because I'm a hobbyist. I like models, and they are cool from Games Workshop, and they will disappear in a 2 years period. And until then, they will go up in price. So I'm buying this better now or never, if you're reasonable.
However, one thing, I want to bring this back to 3D printing.
Yeah.
What I was thinking was so amazingly insidious about what Games Workshop has done in training us that we always need new models and that we need to buy them, and like we always want the next shiny thing. They've created kind of like a hype mill. They've created like this addiction in hobbyists that they can't even meet. Like they get these things out so fast, but they're still not fast enough, and people are always like, what's the next thing, what's the next thing? And that addiction, that like priming, is perfect for 3D printing. That you get the hobbyists spun up to a point where they're like, I need to get the next new model from Games Workshop. And then Games Workshop is relying on, we are the only ones who can meet this need for them, because we are the ones creating like Space Marines. No one else creates Space Marines. You got to buy ours when you want the new space. But with the democratization of the creation of models through 3D printing and 3D sculpting, those people, that huge like ecosystem network of creators out there who are sculpting these things and modifying these things and making them available on the internet, they can meet the demand that Games Workshop can't meet. So Games Workshop got all these people spun up to this point where they want constant new models, and now they can't meet the demand. So people are going to that third-party market because those models, there's always new 3D sculpts. There's always new stuff. And I don't know if it's a genie in the bottle thing, but Games Workshop can't rein that back in because they can't meet the demand at the speed that the community is.
It's more like a cat chasing its own tail to me. It's so fast, no matter how fast the cat runs, it will never catch its own tail.
But now there's 3 more cats with 3 more tails.
Yeah.
3D printing. Like you just go and grab someone else's tail.
And you have, when you think about how the 3D printing model market works, most of them are Patreons that push out every single month a whole set of miniatures for you to print. And that amount is, when you think about, I don't know how many models you build and prime and base and paint and play with each month, but I'm building more models than I'm playing with, and I paint not as much as I build. So I have the most build painted, and then I have the second pile is the painted models, and the smallest part is the played, build, and painted models. But anyway, when you think about getting in a Patreon every month 20-25 different models every single month, and you print them, you cannot tell me that you're ever going to paint that. Ever.
I mean, there may be some people who are super prolific who do paint that much, who really love painting, and like they've got it down to like a science. But you're right. The vast majority of hobbyists probably are never going to get through that number of models. I guess it's also the case that when you are subscribed to those Patreons, you don't necessarily have to print them to feel the value. Like you get the files from the guy, you put them in your folder, and you're like, I could print these ones. It's kind of like having a box of models on the shelf where you're like, I could crack this box open and I could build these, but it's just stored digitally, that box, in your computer.
Everyone I know with a 3D printer has like a small server room full with hard disks with STLs in it, it's the digital
pile of shame.
I don't want to sound so negative. I don't want to say there are two ways to look at those. It's either the pile of shame or the pile of possibilities, and I rather dub for pile of possibilities. It kind of fits more into thinking that GW has implanted in my brain, because I see a box and I'm thinking about the possibilities, not of the real value or if I can use it right now. It's more like, okay, I buy that because I maybe foresee myself in the future using that. I am not using it right now, but I rather have it right right now here with me than needing it in 2 years. But on the other side, if you think about what you already have and you're sitting there and you suddenly go, oh shit, I need a hand or I need a head and I don't want to sculpt it, you go to that pile of possibilities and shift through it and take out that hand or that face, or you find something else. And that's part of the creative process. I don't want to sound so negative, or I don't want to judge on that. I'm trying more to observe how those mechanisms work to make, to drag them out into the light and make people aware of that, how they're functioning and how they work. So, but everyone I know who has a 3D printer has, I don't know how many terabyte full of STLs, because a Patreon is not expensive and you get 25, 30 models a month. And then you have like so many different studios that produce them. And suddenly you have like, I don't know, for fairly cheap, you have like 50 models, 100 models a month.
I guess that is the unlimited models. It's unlimited digital models rather than unlimited physical models. The unlimited potential of more models through like as many STLs as you can collect and store. The only question that remains:
does it make you happy? Does it fulfill the need? Does it satisfy you?
This is a good question to come to. That this is something I don't know that we talked about previously. Like, does it make you happy? Which is a very deep question. Like, that's a metaphorical question. I was talking with Nora the other day about like, are you happy with your life? And I'm like, oh God, I hate that question, because I feel like the cool like societal answer is to have like existential ennui. It's like, no, I'm not happy with how I am. But I honestly try to live like, I'm pretty happy. I mean, things could be better, but why would I sit here and like complain about it and like worry about it? But when it comes to miniatures, when it comes to hobby, like, are you happy? Like, does the unlimited supply, or the virtually unlimited supply of STLs, the possibilities, all those possibilities of being able to make anything you want at home with your printer, does that fill a hole in you, or does it just dig the hole deeper? That with those unlimited possibilities, your expectations grow exponentially for what you should have access to. Because I noted someone in the hobby who we know, they have a printer and they've been embracing third-party prints, all that kind of stuff. They saw the new Imperial Guard models from Games Workshop. And like, say what you will about the new Imperial Guard models, how long it took, whether they're good or not, proportions. We had between the Bolter and me on here, they could talk all day about like how messed up the head sizes are versus the hand sizes versus the guns, all that stuff. But like, they're decent models. But this person who has really embraced 3D printing looked at them and was immediately like, oh, they're shit. Oh, they're terrible. You could print such better models from STLs. There's so many better STLs out there. Like, they're just crap. So maybe it sets your expectations to such a level where they can never be met. What do you think? Will you ever be happy?
I am not sure, because I am a process guy. I think when you are happy, that's the end. Because when you're absolutely happy, what else should happen? Well, you can become a Buddhist monk and be happy with nothing at all, just you and the air you're breathing and the moment you're living in, and then you're perfectly happy. Maybe then you're free. We're almost getting religious here, but
I like it.
Hobby-wise,
this is supposed to be deep thought, so go deep, buddy.
Hobby-wise, that's why I'm circling back. When am I happy? And I am happy when I'm interacting with people and the social aspect. Like when I sit down with a friend and I laugh my ass off and we have a good game and we enjoy the time that we have with the stuff we have built. That's, to me, that's the whole circle. I have built something, I have painted something, I'm meeting up with a friend, we're rolling dice, we're having a good time, and we create stories, we share those stories, we live very in this moment. And we've worked to accomplish this moment. And with our miniatures. And that's when I'm happy. And I realize how happy I am, like happy on a biological level, because my brain is full of dopamine. And I realize like 2 hours on the way home, when I'm at home, I'm like, I'm wondering when I can play the next time.
Yeah.
Because I'm craving for that
That's
happiness again.
I really like that question and that interrogation of like what part of the hobby makes you happy. Like we said like, oh yeah, like if you have unlimited miniatures, are you happy? But that's actually something that I'd like to hear from other hobbyists about. Like, what aspect of your hobby is the one that makes you happy? So like kind of how Simon answered. Post in the comments. This is going to be posted on YouTube. I'll also put this out as like an audio version, so you obviously can't comment on the podcast version, but you can go to YouTube and find this video and comment there, or you can send me an email at modernsynthesist with a T on the end at gmail.com. Let me know what makes you happy in the hobby, and we can share those out. But yeah, for me, when I reflect on it, I think the reason that I don't paint as many miniatures is that I don't need to paint a miniature to be happy with it. I need to like take a miniature, I need to convert it, and I need to express a concept that I want to get out, like a new, different version for something. And as soon as I'm done the conversion, as soon as I'm done like the sculpting part of it, I'm happy. And when people come and they're like, "Oh, that's so cool! I'd love to see it painted," I'm like, "Tough titties! I don't care. Like, it doesn't need to be painted for me to express the concept." I think it's like taking miniatures and thinking of them as like concept sketches. It's like, oh yeah, you could do it this way, or here's another way that you could make that miniature, and just like sharing that out and having people like see it and possibly be inspired by it, react to it, whatever. Like that's completing the concept makes me happy, and I don't need to paint it. Although like I've been painting more miniatures lately, and I've been happy with it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. They look really nice, and that feels a little more complete. But honestly, I'm happy when I finish a conversion, because that's how I express like the creative idea that I want to get out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think we were going to go that deep. That was a really good question, man. And then like,
so
is there more you can say about how you feel that feeds into 3D printing and sculpting and stuff like that? Or
so I've thought about 3D printing as it's getting more affordable, it's getting more accessible, it's close to plug and play. I have looked at the printouts, at the models that got printed by my friend. I say what he printed would not make me happy, because, for example, last week we played the Stargrave scenario where the two crews were meeting up in a on a party, like in a bar, and he said, well, like 5 years ago, having civilian models on a table was almost close to impossible, because there simply are no civilian models. And he said, well, he found this Patreon.
You've always been telling me to get hassle-free miniatures for civilians.
Of course, but those are fantasy, and they're kind of, they still look like models. They don't have like a civilian pose. They're not walking with their case, or standing on the corner smoking a cigarette or something like that, or an IO stick or whatever. So, like playing the scenario 5 years ago would have been depending on the rules to represent the civilians. They are depicted in the rules, but of the scenario. But what he did was he said, well, I found in the preparation for the game, he said, I found this Patreon, and they have science fiction civilians, and I'm printing 20 of them. So he printed 20 civilian models without the need to convert them and whatever. And he was happy with them. Yeah, he printed them, and he with contrast, it wasn't much of a paint job he had to do, and he was happy to put them on the table. And I looked at them and I was like, okay.
Because you weren't happy with the sculpts?
No. From an arm's reach afar, like from the place where I'm standing, I could see
Pokemon
them
test?
as... Huh?
Was it the Pokemon test? They had like the silhouette of a human, and you get close and you're like, why is it melted wax?
The thing is with 3D printing, for me at least, lot of Patreons I've seen have not adopted to the traditional tabletop standard. They, I think
Yeah.
because they're sculpting them on screen, they have the ability to make them more naturalistic, like the real proportions of a human being, maybe even like
Yeah.
longer and spindlier, because we all want to be thin and healthy and whatnot, have a nice suntan on our
Yeah.
ass. Um, but that looks but that looks shit as a model when you have like regular plastic dudes standing next to them. They're like squat and brute,
Okay.
and then they have your naturalistic spindly dudes there
Oh,
with hands who are so tiny. And then I said to him,
interesting.
they're really large, don't you think? And he said, yes, they are almost like 32 millimeters in
Yeah.
scale,
Scale. Yeah.
but they're super narrow. And I said, well, maybe have you tried to scale them down? And he said, yes, I can do that. But then the hands and certain details become so
Too
thin,
small.
they disappear. They're not printed anymore, even though he has a rather good resolution as a printer. It's not printed anymore because of the support and whatnot. So you cannot
Yeah.
unlimited scale down things because eventually they will become so thin they disappear.
Yeah.
So, for example, if you make a model and I think that's a problem with the medium the sculptors are working in, because they're on the computer, on the screen. You don't have like the comparison to how another miniature will look. And so
Yeah.
he was happy with the result, and I was happy because we had civilians on the table, and from my end of the table it looked kind of cool, but it was the silhouette thing. If it would have been me, I would have been super hyped by, ooh, I can print unlimited civilian models, and then I would have looked at the printout and would have been like, huh, okay.
We started off, well, part of like what we started off was talking about price and how Games Workshop keeps like frog in boiling water ratcheting up the price, and like we slowly adapt to it and we accept it. And when we talk about 3D printing and how it's like our savior, it can save us from price, it's so cheap, whatever. I want to think about the reverse, which is with this democratization, sharing of miniature production, does it introduce a race to the bottom aspect where, because it's so cheap, people don't do the Games Workshop thing anymore where they expect to pay a little more for better models. They start expecting to pay less and less and less and less. That if you buy a 3D printed model that someone actually printed or cast for you, you pay like kind of normal miniature prices, but cheaper than Games Workshop. But if you're paying for an STL, you think you're going to get it for real cheap. Like,
Yeah.
either you sign up for a Kickstarter where you pay $10 a month and they give you like this many STLs or whatever, or that you're just buying the STL off someone and you're paying like maybe $10, $12, $15 for that STL. And it kind of like, I don't know, for some reason I thought about the idea of AI art. Have you heard about this with like DALL-E and what's the other one, Midjourney, where you can put in these prompts, you can create art, and what it's doing is it's taking art from the internet and it's mixing and matching it together and creating new pieces. And none of those AI art programs provide any kind of compensation to the original artists. They just kind of skim their art, recombine it, put it out for free.
Yep.
And I wonder if that could be happening with the explosion of 3D printing and 3D sculpting, where people like, I don't know how to say this, but they take Games Workshop's concepts, they remix them, they recombine them, they spit them out, and they charge like bargain basement prices for them, or they give them away for free in some cases. And though you noted that the markup that Games Workshop puts on their pieces is a bit high to cover like the creative input, the production costs, like the slight markup to make thing, whatever, I would say that probably the prices that are being charged on 3D printing are a bit low. That the people who run these Patreons, like when Hive Delta creates like this brand new like Tyranid, he could sell that thing for like 50, $60 or whatever on its own, but people are getting it for $10 or less through the Patreon, and they expect to get another one in a month. And like he has to spend like a good part of a month sculpting a brand new model, and the only way that he can make it financially viable for himself is at scale. That he needs to have 100 people sponsoring him on Patreon or something like that, so that he gets like a real salary out of that. And like that is creative labor. Like
Yeah.
creative people need to be compensated. And I just kind of like, I see a bit of it where it's really weird. I'll post like a obviously sculpted model that has the gray plastic that I got from Games Workshop and the green stuff that I put on it, and people are like, "Can I get the STL?" I'm like, "STL? It's got green stuff on it, for Christ's sake!" Like, I didn't 3D print this thing, but yeah, that's one of the things that I might have talked about this in the previous video, but that's one of the parts that I find concerning, that people are expecting original, different, new concepts to be free or virtually free, through like CAD sculpting, through this kind of stuff. And I worry about that. Go ahead.
I think it's even worse. They expect more quicker. Like
Yes.
every month.
We talked about that addiction ramp where it's like you need new models all the time that Games Workshop set us up for, and that the community, this disparate community of 3D designers, are kind of meeting that need and providing more and more. But yeah, when you're in a Patreon, it's like interminable that Delta needs to provide a brand new Tyranid every month, and it's like that's some work. Yeah,
and there is eventually an end to that, because as my old art teacher used to say, the human brain cannot invent something new. We can only recombine things we have already seen, which is I'm no pity for Games Workshop, don't get me wrong, but they are like the alpha here, and they are on the constant pressure of inventing something new. It's a pressure they have put on their own. Like, as I said, no pity, but they are constantly trying to invent something new, which means that they eventually branch out. Like Primaris Space Marines, as much as they are loathed by the old dudes and loved by the young dudes, were inevitable, and they will be replaced eventually by the next kind of Space Marine. The concept itself will stay. It's a knight with a backpack and a gun. And those three things will stay as they are, but they will be eventually reinvented because it will get old. People want to see new things. But all those other companies are, feasting on those things. As I said, recombination. I've seen STLs for sort of stand-in Creek, Death Corps of Creek models, which, replaced helmets. They still have gas masks, and they still have las rifles. They still have coats. Like all the traits are there, but they changed the helmets for something else. But they are just recombining things that kind of Games Workshop has already started with. GW or Forge World for Death Corps of Creek already recombinated things that already existed. I pretty fondly remember the debate if those were kind of German World War One soldiers or French or whatever, but they're a blend of different uniform types. And I think there will be an end to that, because there are always like hypes and new ideas. For example, the mushroom hype was there a while, and this will be replaced eventually by the next hype, but we will reach the point where we cannot invent something completely new. And so this is a race rat. Like, none of us can win.
Well, or it's going to be the case that Games Workshop continues to create things that are like, sure, they're not completely new. Like, they're also recombinations, but they're going to recombine. For example, they're going to recombine sci-fi elements into squats, like Votan, whatever. And then the community is going to be like, okay, cool, yeah. And then they're going to take the Games Workshop stuff and further make derivatives of like those recombinations of recombinations of recombinations. And Games Workshop will continue to be the source for it, because they, like you said, so many people are into Games Workshop IP that in order for your Patreon to be, well, not in order for your Patreon to be successful, but probably an easier way for your Patreon to be successful is for it to kind of like play in the boundaries of Games Workshop IP. So they need to keep being fed.
I would bet, I don't have any numbers, but I have the theory on which I would bet that if you're running a 3D printing Patreon and you have GW stand-ins, you will be more successful than if you have originally your own idea, own concepts for whatever. Because most
Yeah.
of the time, people, well, the majority of people playing tabletop will play Games Workshop stuff, so they always have the
Yep.
GW lens on when they look at models. And when they
Yeah.
find something that kind of suits their needs, which were created by GW, they will take those. And I think that's the same problem the 3D sculptor community has, is the same problem that the YouTube community has. Like all those people complaining. There was this video recently where someone complained or gave to think about how GW dominates the YouTube content. Because if you want to live from YouTube, um, you are dependent on clicks. And
Yeah.
the biggest clicks always are given to GW. So if you
Yeah.
create GW content, or you have, I don't know, 15,000 followers, and you create a GW video, it will be clicked 15,000 times. If you create Frostgrave content, it will be clicked 500 times. And so this way,
Yeah.
GW kind of dominates the market. And I think that's on YouTube a problem because of the algorithm. Um,
Yeah.
and I think it is the problem for the STL creators or the 3D model creators, because people will always want something for GW IP.
Yes. Yeah, and like I noted before, part of that is because Games Workshop was our on-ramp to miniature wargaming, and I think Games Workshop is a lot of people's on-ramp to miniature wargaming. So like people diversify away from it, like you've done with a whole bunch of other games, but it's always in the back of their mind, and it's always like a common language. And this is something certainly that Miniac, who's a sizable games or miniature YouTuber, has said that he has to make videos about painting Space Marines. He hates painting Space Marines, but painting Space Marine videos are the videos that get clicks, and like
Yeah.
he needs clicks to be able to survive on there. Yeah, so it's weird. It's like a weird kind of symbiosis, parasitic relationship where the 3D printers are taking away from Games Workshop's business, like they're trying to skim some off of it by like getting people to do their alternate sculpts and builds, but they need Games Workshop because that's the on ramp, that's the IP that everyone knows, and like if they can do their own IP, but it might not be as successful as IP that is derivative from Games Workshop, and then at a point like they might reach the end of like their own ideas, and then they got to go back to the Games Workshop well to be like, well, what's Games Workshop doing now? How can I do a variation on like Slaves to Darkness or Votan or Tyranids or whatever? Yeah, so there is some symbiosis or parasitic stuff going on there between the two communities. They can't exist without each other, but they're existing in opposition of one another. So I don't know.
Yeah. But we are here to discuss the topic of is it a savior? And the question
Yes. So
that
final answer: is it a savior? What do you say?
the question that pops in my mind is, do I need to be saved? And
All
if
right.
I need to be saved, from what do I need to be saved? And I think
Yeah.
it would be rather Buddhistic to say, or even Hinduistic to say, what I need to be saved from is my own desire. Because that my desire is the thing that keeps me from being happy. So maybe I should go back and think about what makes me happy, and then see if I can find the tools to reach that. So if unlimited models is the thing that makes me happy, if I love to dwell in unpainted piles of miniatures, then 3D printer a 3D printer can be my savior, because it will be fulfilling my need. If I don't think about the quality, if I just think about the quantity, it is my savior. For me personally, 3D printing would be another tool in my toolbox, because as I mentioned earlier, for example, I want to create an army. When I personally build something, build an army, build a warband, build a thing for tabletop, I want it to be unique as possible. I want it to be my own design.
Yeah.
I want it to be my own idea, and I will recombine things to reach that goal, to make it unique and come up with new ideas. And for me, a 3D printer would be something that I could add to that. For example, like printing is originally making unlimited copies of the same thing. For example, before GW put out the skull set, skulls were very precious because they were just singly in just a few kits. Otherwise, you would always have to cut them from something else. And I had a little container full of holy skulls, and I always considered, do I take one skull or do I take two skulls? And now I have kind of already access to unlimited skulls, and I'm putting skulls everywhere. Does it make better or not? We can discuss about that sometime else. But where am I going with that is I would take a printer and sculpt something and then print it 15 times, 30 times so I can reuse it again and reuse it again. For example, I don't know, tentacles. Yeah, rolling up green stuff and putting it in shape and setting it aside and waiting for it to cure. And that's lots of time that goes into having finally a tentacle that I could glue to a certain piece of my model. And I would use a 3D printer to make my own bits that I could use in my conversions. And then I have unlimited access to those bits that I have created myself. Or even bits that are buyable as STLs. I would not use a printer to print whole models because I would be missing something, cutting apart, drilling holes, filling gaps.
Yeah.
Seeing where the putty takes me. So that would be 3D printing would not be my savior. It would be another tool in my toolbox box. And therefore, as it is so time consuming, I don't have a printer because I would have to invest the time into how to learn to 3D sculpt, and then I would have to take the time and learn how to print, because that's also a steep learning curve with lots of steps you can, misstep, and then you suddenly have destroyed your printer for 500 euros.
Or at least destroyed all your sculpting. I don't know.
Yeah. And so I'm staying away from that. So I would say 3D printing is not my savior.
Okay. And as you talk about that, I'm reminded, I think I've mentioned this before, but I'm reminded of a very, very talented kit basher creator on Instagram, The Polysmith. And I think he was in an interview with Between the Bolter and Me, and he was saying that the Polysmith is a 3D sculptor. Like not for miniatures, like for video games, for movie, like that kind of stuff. Like commercially, his job is to create art on computers using like 3D sculpting, that kind of stuff. So he is shit hot at it. He can do it like in his sleep. And he has said that he still prefers doing things manually. Like the joy of like tactile creation, of like converting things, taking parts, putting them together. Like he could make unlimited parts for whatever he wanted to create, but he enjoys the part where he gets to like cut up a miniature and recombine parts and like sculpt them together and stuff like that. Over doing it all on a computer. And that's weird because like he could do it on a computer so easy, but he loves that.
I can absolutely understand where he goes at, because as I said previously, it's all about recombination. So if I have like I'm having a box full of toothpicks here, which already has a purpose, and it already has a shape. And now, as a hobbyist or as a miniature maker, I'm repurposing and recombine the thing to be something else. And maybe if I stick arms to this and here and have legs to here and there, and I don't know, it could be a killer can for orcs. Or if I hold it sideways and add wings to it, it could be, or a jetpack on the back, it could be an airplane or a StarCraft, or I don't know. This thing can be the start for a creative process because it already has a shape. If I have a 3D printer, I have this. Nothing. I have to start from anew. And this is way more difficult because I would assume that most 3D sculptors are at first drawing things on paper and then working from there, rather than having this gray ball at the beginning, and then they start to pour and shape it. And I think it's a way different creative process where the element of surprise and spontaneous, how can I say that? How can I put that?
Inspiration, like spontaneous
inspiration. Yeah, inspiration. You see a shape, and the inspiring moment is that you see a shape and you see something else in it than its
Yeah,
originally meaning. Like when you build a science fiction table, do yourself a treat and go into the electricity department of your home improvement store, because you will
yeah,
suddenly see boxes and cans which are not, like, they are silos and they are kind of towers and all kinds of stuff, and not, you see them with a different eye and a different purpose. And this is where the
yeah.
creation, where the inspired innovative part starts, and this is extremely satisfying when you have a certain
Yeah.
part and you turn it into something else and it looks completely different. You still can tell that this piece there has been lighter before, or this piece there has been part of your headphones before, but now it's a robot.
Yeah. 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 So I guess like through your conversation about like is it your savior? It sounds like you're more into the tactile creation, like what Polysmith observed. For me, whether 3D sculpting, 3D printing is my savior, uh, I don't. Yeah, I don't know if I need saving. I guess I'm privileged in a way that I have money to afford Games Workshop models, and I also have vast stores of Games Workshop models just sitting here that I can draw on when I want to do things. But when I think about like sculpting, printing, though it's like it's a small part of my hobby, I do commissions for people and I create original models for people, and I enjoy that. And that I was talking before about like what makes me happy, and what makes me happy is like having a concept and then realizing it in a miniature. I realized a while ago that I don't need to hold on to those miniatures. Like when I made the big dominatrix, the Tyranid dominatrix, and for a commission, people are like, "Oh my god, like aren't you so sad? Like you made that and you have to give it away." I'm like, "Yeah, all I needed to do was make it. I needed to be able to express the concept that I had and be like, I can make something this big and I can make this dom like such a big creature and have like all the different parts in it." And once I had created it, sure, it would be great to have it because I sculpted it from scratch, but I would not have created it if someone else hadn't paid me for that time. Like that might sound really mercenary, but it's a motivation. It's a deadline.
Yeah.
It's something that in the back of my mind I'm like, oh, I can make another dominatrix someday. But then I never get to someday because I do this project, I do that project, I get distracted. But when someone's like, hey, I want you to make me a dominatrix, it's like, cool, I finally get to do that dominatrix thing. And this was something that I realized when I did a commission to do part of a homunculus coven, and I literally just wanted to make the cool models. I didn't want to have them, but I didn't have the money to buy the models and like the reason to do it. So I got a commission so that I can make that. So when I think about stuff like that, I enjoy the creation of these original models for people, and I enjoy them being centerpiece models. And when people commission me to do something, they understand that it takes time, it takes effort, it takes materials, and they pay me for that time, effort, and materials. When someone comes to me asking for an STL, they don't want to pay for that. This is why I mentioned like race to the bottom thing, that I think that if I were sure, it would be cool to be able to sculpt the dominatrix in CAD and then print it, cast it, and then I could sell casts of it to people. But A, Games Workshop IP, worrying about that. Even though I created it all myself, it's still derivative of their IP. And B, as soon as that happens, someone's going to want the STL. And how much are they going to pay for the STL? $20, $30. I'm not interested in getting into that race. Go ahead.
And then we haven't touched on another problem there. Um, Even those $20, like from 100 people that have the STL, I would say half of them have paid for it, and the
Yeah.
other has found them on a share platform piracy kind of thing. And
Yeah.
the problem is, as you said, the scale downwards with the price expectation is not
Yeah.
GW's problem. It's the problem for the little people, for the one man
Yeah.
shows, because they are
Yeah.
expected, like you're doing 3D printing. I'm expecting you to be cheap, and suddenly you want to charge me money for what I'm expecting to be cheap. Why is that suddenly coming from? So I think
Yeah.
that's a danger for the little ones themselves. Like finding a reasonable price there is very difficult. But like how many people have approached me or have approached you and coming up with the, hey, I would love to have a model commissioned by you, and then you say what would be a fair price. We're not, you're
Yeah.
not asking. I know you, so I know you're not asking um, for like moon prices. You're asking for a modest but fair compensation for the time, effort, and material you.
Evaluation of my effort. Like, I know what I'm worth and that's what I charge. But the first question I ask anyone when they ask for a commission is, have you ever commissioned something before? Are you aware of like the time that goes into this, like the cost of it? And yeah, and I'm also fortunate that I have a full-time job that I can do. I don't have to subsist on commissions. And like I think that that allows me to fairly price my time. And if I had to subsist off them, I would have to price my time a lot cheaper. And yeah, when I think about like 3D sculpting, 3D printing, that kind of stuff, I'm not interested in like contributing to that race to the bottom. That because I'm privileged and I do my hobby in my spare time, I can choose what projects I take on, what projects I don't. It would be a completely different thing if I was trying to live from my hobby. Like some of these people who are running Patreons are, that they have to keep producing at these low prices because that's what funds their creative profession. So yeah, I'd rather make one-off models for people who value them than make one-off models for the masses for cheap slash free, because that wouldn't, I don't feel like that would adequately value the time that put into it. And I don't really want to support that. But that isn't to say that like I don't approve of other people doing it. Like that's fine. If you're able to find a way to make your time that you invest in your sculpting worthwhile from a monetary perspective, depending on however you value your time, like that's awesome. And people are definitely benefiting from it. But I guess if I could give any advice to people who buy STLs and who buy 3D prints and stuff like that, be ready to pay for someone else's creative time. Like you're getting a deal, no question. You're getting a deal. You're getting it for cheap. Consider like comparing it to Games Workshop. And if your buddy's like, hey, listen, I've got this STL, here, have it. Like maybe look and see if you can like pay the guy $10 or $15 for it if you're going to use it and you're going to print it, if it's still available, because that will mean that you'll have more cool STLs. Like it's the whole thing with like pirating movies and like blah 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 blah. But this is not pirating movies from like a multinational $1 million corporation. This is pirating models from someone who, yeah, someone like you who did this in their basement. And the more you give to those people doing it in their basement, the more your bowl will be full of glorious alternative models to the standard game companies. So yeah, if you have the ability to give money for these STLs, give money. Even if it's a donation, make a donation. If it's pay whatever you want, don't pay $1, don't pay $5. Like think about what you would pay for this from Games Workshop. You could pay them that much if you want, or you could be like, if I bought this terrain from Games Workshop, it would cost me $80. This guy's saying pay what I want. Maybe I can pay a little more than $5, maybe like $10, $15, because every extra dollar that you put into it is another cool model that person's going to make for you.
And that's where the happiness comes back in. I think you can, if you are aware of that, you can be more happy with the model that you have because it is increased in its value. So printing it and having it in your hand, it will be more valuable to yourself. Circling back to where we started with a little metal space marine with a jump pack, I remember how happy I was with that space marine jump pack dude and how much time and love I put into him. He looks horrible, no doubt, but it was all my joy for weeks, and I was very happy because it has a value for me. And if it
Yeah.
loses the value, I realized at some point that I had bought without blinking a 50, I think it was 20 Space Marines with jump packs, like 4 boxes, because I wanted them for my army. And then I built 3 of them, and I was like, nah, I'm bothered by putting the jump packs together, and I don't like the mold line there. And oh, look, Space Marines have a new codex, and jump packs are not so good anymore. So I put them away. And I had 20 of them, and they did not make me happy because it did not have the same value as my little metal dude. And I think if you think what makes you happy, you have to make what you have to turn into something that is valuable for yourself. And if you get the STL for free, but you're giving the dude who made it money, you pay for it. And you make the dude who made the STL, you make him happy, and you value his work. He will feel valued, and he will feel motivated. He will not buy a Rolls Royce from it. He will not get his teeth in gold from it. But he will feel the love that you have for his miniature, because this hobby, especially as a content creator, is so often one way. You put all the work into the things and you put it out there, and then you will get a thumbs up or a heart and like and subscribe down here, because it means for the creator that whoever is receiving what he's doing is valuable to them. And if you don't like it, please tell them. If you don't like my voice, please write it down here and say never have his shitty face on here again. And I will be gone and I'll leave you alone with Mr. Pink. But
nah, that's so bullshit. I like your shitty face too much.
Yeah, I will stick. So you can give the love that you feel for the hobby back towards who's ever creating the thing. And you can at the same time rise the value that you have in your hand at the same time, which will make you more happy. Wonderful final word.
And that, I think, that was a beautiful final word. As you say, I'm just making a note right here. As Hydra says, give the love that you feel for the hobby back to the person who's creating the stuff that you love. What better time than that to remind people that if you've enjoyed this video, this random conversation between Hydra and I, please like this video. Please leave us a comment below. Let us know what you thought. Let us know, like we asked before, what brings you joy in your hobby? What's the thing that makes you happiest? And also let us know if you think that 3D printing, 3D sculpting is your savior. And if there's some way that it has helped you find more joy in your hobby, or if, like we were talking about, if it's just made you desire more shiny new miniatures. And if you really like this, or you like other videos that I've created, you can show the joy back to me, because I created a Patreon. There's no tiers in it or anything like that. You can just go on it and you can contribute whatever you want. And people on Patreon get advanced looks at the videos that I create, both sculpting tutorials and like Deepthought videos like this. Yeah, so if you want to, you can contribute, or you can just like leave a like here, subscribe, comment. That's fine too. But there you go. As Hydra said, show people that you enjoy their content, and they will make more enjoyable content for you. Yeah, Hydra, thank you so much for talking about this. This went in a lot of different ways that I wasn't expecting, but I think it's really cool, and I'm pretty happy with it. Like just random stuff we talked about that wasn't exactly related to 3D printing, but about the hobby in general. I still think it was really neat, and I think people will enjoy it. And yeah, we'll have to find our next topic that we want to do a deep dive on. So you can give some thought to that. Do you have any final words that you wanted to say?
If you have a topic you want us talking about, dear listeners,
yes, please put it in the comments on YouTube. Or like I said earlier, if you're listening out there in podcast land, please email me. My email is modernsynthesist. It's got a T on the end. Modernsynthesist, all one word, @gmail.com. And you could send that through, and then we can consider ideas for further deep dive conversations. That would be great. Or of course, leave them in the comments below here on YouTube. Good observation, good comment. And is that anything else you want to share?
Go out there and spread the love. And God knows we need it.
Perfect. All right, Hydra, thank you so much. And we'll chat again soon.
Yeah, thank you for having me.